Hey all, welcome back for week 3, a shortened week, as you guys know. Since we have Labor Day on Monday, no class for that, so we're just doing half a week, the Wednesday class. So that means we'll just be reading Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper and discussing that this week, and then next week we'll be back to our kind of two class day model. All right, but this is also the first day of our new unit. We've kind of finished up our introduction to horror, and we're moving into the first unit, which I've called Losing Your Mind, or the Psychology of Horror. And so I want to say a few words about that in broad strokes here at the beginning. As we know, at this point, horror fiction has a whole range of topics, themes, foci. There are many things that frighten us, right? Monsters, haunted houses, disasters, nuclear war, isolation. So these are all things that horror can choose to focus on, and that list goes on and on. But perhaps the most frightening thing of all, because it is so intimate, so personal, so familiar and unfamiliar at the same time, perhaps the most frightening thing of all is the human mind itself. We understand the mind to be the seat of our identity, of our individuality. It's the thing that we should know the best, from the inside out, as it were, because we're living in it, inside our mind, right? But sometimes we do not know it. Sometimes the mind, our own as well as other people's, is a place of uncertainty, a place of doubt, a place of obscurity. Sometimes we have no idea how the mind works or why. And horror fiction loves to capitalize on that anxiety. It's an anxiety about the potential breakdown of our own psyche. Who are we if we are not who we think we are? If we can't trust our own thoughts, what in this world can we trust? In some ways, there are some philosophers that argue all that we have are our thoughts. Because we're inside our own heads, that's all we ever get, right? If you can't trust your own thoughts, what can you possibly trust? And just as alarming, what if we can't trust the seeming identity or thoughts or minds of other people? What if we can't really ever know what they're thinking or what they might do? So I think that this form of horror fiction, the focus on the mind and psychology, is as widespread as it is because it's a common anxiety. Sometimes we may doubt our thoughts and feelings, our own thoughts and feelings. Sometimes we may doubt our own sanity. But I think, so that happens to us, maybe some of us sometimes, but I think at some point, all of us have doubts about the thoughts, feelings, and motivations of others. In some ways, the mind of another person, it's the final frontier. It's the thing we can't cross. It's a complete mystery to us, ultimately. We never get access to it. We get what they offer us via communication, right? Language, gestures, what have you. But we only get it through that medium. We never get direct access to it. And so we can never be entirely sure of it. Are they telling the truth? Is this accurate? Does he even like me? Does she really love me? Does he care about anything? Why would he hurt a dog like that? Right? These questions, we can't ever know, really, ultimately, finally, what's inside somebody else's head. And that can be an alarming, anxiety-inducing prospect. So the mind, right, is the source of a great deal of uncertainty for us. And so again, horror fiction leverages this into some truly terrifying narratives. Madness, in one form or another, returns again and again in horror fiction. In fact, pause the video for a moment here and try to brainstorm, just for a minute or two, as many horror stories or films as you can that focus on a lunatic, a psychopath, a serial killer, or a split personality. Go ahead, pause it for a second and see how many you can come up with. Okay, we're back. I'm guessing that you came up with quite a few. There are many. They are legion, we might say. Let me show you a couple of clips from some famous horror films that focus on madness. Take a look.
Seems to me you're just plain scared.
Yes. Yeah, I am. I met him 15 years ago. I was told there was nothing left. no reason, no conscience, no understanding, and even the most rudimentary sense of life or death, of good or evil, right or wrong. I met this 6-year-old child with this blank, pale, emotionless face and the blackest eyes, the devil's eyes. I spent 8 years trying to reach him, and then another 7 trying to keep him locked up, because I realized that what was living behind that boy's eyes was purely and simply evil.
What do we do?
He's been here once tonight. I think he'll come back. I'm gonna wait for him.
Okay. Perhaps some of you know what that movie is. It's from the original Halloween from the 1970s, John Carpenter's Halloween. And that's a scene in which the psychiatrist, Donald Pleasance, is sort of talking to the cop about Michael Myers, the killer, and sort of what he's experienced seeing him. So the whole centerpiece of that movie, right, is Michael Myers as this sociopathic killer. And then the psychiatrist is trying to catch him. Take a look at one more clip here. This is a clip from Manhunter from 1986. It's the first time that we see Hannibal Lecter on screen. This is before Silence of the Lambs. And so you have a different actor playing Hannibal Lecter. It's not Anthony Hopkins like it is in Silence of the Lambs. It's a guy named Brian Cox. It's just a scene where a detective, Will Graham, is interviewing Hannibal Lecter. And actually, for my money, Brian Cox's Hannibal Lecter is more frightening than Anthony Hopkins. I know that that's heresy for a lot of people, but I think so. Anyway, it's another scene in which we see sort of psychology as the centerpiece of the horror here. So take a look at this clip.
That's the same atrocious aftershave you wore in court 3 years ago.
Yeah, I keep getting it for Christmas.
Did you get my card?
I got it, thank you.
And how's Officer Stewart? The one who was first to see my basement.
Stuart's fine.
Emotional problems, I hear. Do you have any problems, Will?
No.
No. Of course you don't. I'm glad you came. My callers are mostly clinical psychologists from Cornfield University somewhere. Second raters, the lot.
Dr. Bloom showed me your article on surgical addiction in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry.
And?
Very interesting. Even to a layman. I want you to help me, Dr. Lecter.
Yes. I thought so.
It's about Atlanta and Birmingham.
Yes?
You read about it?
In the papers. I don't tear out the articles. I wouldn't want them to think I was dwelling on anything morbid. You want to know how he's choosing them, don't you?
I thought you might have some ideas.
Why should I tell you?
You get to see the file on this case. And there's another reason.
Pray tell.
Thought you might be curious to see if you're smarter than the person I'm looking for.
Then by implication, you think you're smarter than me since you caught me.
No. I know that I'm not smarter than you.
Then how did you catch me, Will?
You had disadvantages.
What disadvantages?
You're insane.
You are very tan, Will. Your hands are rough. They don't look like cops' hands anymore. And that shaving lotion is something a child would select. It has a ship on the bottle, doesn't it? Don't think you can persuade me with appeals to my intellectual vanity.
I don't think I'll persuade you at all. You'll either do it or you won't. Besides, we have Dr. Bloom working on it, and he's the best.
Do you have the file with you?
Yes?
Pictures?
Yes?
Let me have them and I might consider it.
No.
Dream much, Will?
Goodbye, Dr. Lecter.
You haven't threatened to take away my books yet. Let me have the file and I'll tell you what I think.
Okay. Still freaks me out. I love that bit where he says, "Oh, so you think you're smarter than me, don't you, Will?" And he says, "No, I know I'm not smarter than you, Dr. Lecter." And he goes, "Well, how did you catch me?" And he says, "Well, you have certain disadvantages." "What disadvantages?" "You're insane." I always like that bit. Okay. So, I mean, this gives you an example. The psychology of horror, the focus on psychology, the psyche, and the mind is a centerpiece for horror. It's everywhere. Interestingly, I think sometimes, as in the Halloween clip, horror fiction depicts madness as a form of evil. So people who behave differently, strangely, sometimes violently, are coded as evil. That's what you get with Michael Myers. He says he was pure evil behind those eyes. So it's one way of thinking about madness. Other times, horror fiction will understand madness to be more of a social phenomenon. That is, madmen are made, not born. Something in a society, something in a family causes the strangeness, the difference. I just read, actually, the last Hannibal book, novel a little while ago. It's called Hannibal Rising, and it's the story of how Hannibal became Hannibal. And so that suggests that there's not a kind of innate evil, rather there is something in society or something in the environment that causes this breakdown, this psychosis. So, I mean, those are two options, right? A form of evil, a socially constructed form of madness. But the best horror, I think, takes a little bit more nuanced view of madness and tries to explore some of the slippery boundaries between so-called sanity and so-called insanity. These lines are blurry in the real world, and I think that in and of itself is a frightening prospect. If we can't even clearly delineate the sane from the insane, who or what can we trust? Our entire social and psychological framework starts to feel a little shaky. And I think actually the clip, or the film Manhunter that we just watched a clip from, is a good example of this kind of horror, in the sense that the movie is interested in exploring some of the overlaps, some of the similarities between Lecter and Will Graham, the investigator. And Silence of the Lambs does a similar thing. But the idea here is that the horror fiction seems to be asking the question, how do we distinguish these two if they are so similar in this way? Where does madness end, or where does sanity end and insanity begin? And I think that is in lots of ways even more frightening, right? The lack of distinction there, the blurry boundaries. And indeed, this is a concept that we'll return to again and again with horror fiction. The idea that it likes to focus on blurry boundaries. It likes to call attention to distinctions that we take for granted and then call them into question. So sane versus insane. We think, oh, we know what this is, right? There are normal, quote, normal, sane people, and then there are crazy people. Well, of course, that's not the way it works, and horror knows that, and horror wants to sort of focus on the blurriness, the overlap there. But it's not just those two things. Good and evil, living and dead, self and other, inside and outside. These are all kind of oppositions, opposites, distinct boundaries that we feel like we understand, that horror wants to call into question. Most obviously, right, the living and the dead. Vampires, zombies, these are creatures that call into question that distinction, that boundary. So this is a move, the boundary blurring, that horror does in all kinds of different ways. So we'll be coming back to that. But in this case, I think the boundary, the blurred boundary between sanity and insanity is very much in play in psychologically focused horror. So madness then, it's a key theme for horror fiction. It shows up in the 18th century, it shows up in the 19th century, the 20th, the 21st century. It's all over the place. Here's a quick example. Here's the opening paragraph to Edgar Allan Poe's story, The Telltale Heart. Some of you, I'm sure, have read this. Here's the first paragraph. True, this is a first-person narrator. True, nervous, very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am. But why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the sense of hearing acute. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. Right, so immediately this is kind of terrifying, right? Because it becomes clear this person, this narrator, is nuts, just off their rocker, but doesn't know it, right? And so right? We have to sort of call into question the reliability of the narrator, et cetera, and the question of sanity. So yes, this is a common theme throughout horror fiction across the centuries. It's re-engaged and re-explored. Our first story in this unit, another piece from the 19th century, is Charlotte Perkins Gilman's The Yellow Wallpaper. And it, like the Poe story, is a classic account of descent into madness. This was first published in 1892, and it details the experiences of a young wife who's taken by her physician husband to a house in the country in order for her to recuperate from a, quote, temporary nervous depression. He prescribes for her lots of rest, no excitement, and relaxing walks and rides about the property. Things, as you will see, do not go as planned. We'll talk more about some of the specific things going on in the story when we get to the Friday follow-up video. I don't want to ruin it for the people that have not yet read this, but for now, as you work your way through the story and the perusal prompts, I'd like you to be tracking the ways the story describes the narrator's madness. That is, how do we know she's losing her mind exactly? In particular, pay attention to her changing relationship to the figure in the wallpaper. That relationship seems to mark her madness in certain ways. Also pay attention to the way she describes the paper, the wallpaper itself. That seems to me to be another index of her madness, another marker of her madness. Lastly, as you read your way through the story, consider to the larger implications of this narrative. Yes, it's about a woman going mad, and that's scary, but what sorts of larger cultural anxieties or desires do you think that it's engaging with, right? This is a question that we want to ask about horror fiction. What are the larger implications here? What's it showing? If horror fiction is a lens for revealing these cultural dynamics, what do you think this story is revealing? Okay, so more on this soon. The perusal prompts are up, waiting for you. My favorite moment of the story, I have to mention, right, is at the very end when things have gotten super crazy. And she calls out to her husband, "The key is down by the front door under a plantain leaf." I don't know, this is just hilarious and like crazed to me. So I like that bit. Okay, but that's it for now. We'll talk more about this story soon.